In my Season's Greetings video, I was going to talk about the most surprisingly good game of the year, and decided that I had probably too much to say about it to fit in that one video, so I figured I'd make a separate video and kind of rant about that one separately. The most surprisingly good game I've played this year is called Siren Blood Curse, which I believe is a downloadable game in, I think, 12 episodes on the PlayStation Network. I enjoyed it a lot, which is very surprising considering one of my most hated games for the PlayStation 2 is Siren. Siren is a survival horror game that centers around a group of survivors. I think it may be like a dozen survivors that live in a Japanese village called Hanuda. And what happens is, all of a sudden, there's these people who stumble upon a religious ritual when they're interrupted by a constant oppressive rain of blood, and suddenly there is what sounds like an air raid siren that kind of psychically cripples them, but also gives them the ability to see into the minds of other people and the strange living dead that are suddenly stalking them. So the story is about them trying to find either a way out of town or to get to the bottom of the mystery behind Hanuda Village, that kind of thing. So the narrative jumps around very frequently between all the different characters, and so it's got some good elements, but a lot of bad elements. First, the good elements of the original Siren. I actually found the game to be very scary, in the sense that the look and feel of the game is very grimy, very gritty. It uses the kind of the grainy filter that has kind of been abused in the Silent Hill games, but it uses it to great effect here. In fact, the darkness and the oppressive nature of it, the strange Japanese traditional music, it all plays up into a very unique and a very frightening atmosphere, because there's really not any other game like that except maybe Fatal Frame or Clock Tower or something like that. The zombies, or the Shibito as they're called, are also very unique. In both games, they're a genuinely disturbing group of zombies who cannot be killed, which I complained about, but I'll get to that in a second. The zombies have this kind of giggling, manic glee about them, like they're laughing and they're overjoyed, and they're kind of behaving the way they used to behave, but in some like maniacal, murderous fashion. So like the police officer sees you and interprets you as some kind of perpetrator, and he draws his gun at you, and he tells you to get on the ground, but he's going to shoot you anyway. And so that, like, you know, people take their relationships and their affections for each other to like a murderous degree. So it's shocking how some of the characters die, how some of the characters turn against you, and the mysterious passes in the characters. The plot is actually somewhat interesting. The design elements, however, crippled the original Siren, because for all my compliments about the dark atmosphere, it was way too dark, and the game was way too hard. Reason being is, you had a flashlight, but you could never use your flashlight, or the monsters would see you. This makes sense, but it also means you can't see a goddamn thing when you're walking around the levels. You're basically just stumbling around in the dark, hoping beyond hope to find the elements you need to progress through the level. So you're always switching back and forth between the map, which there is no navigation cursor on in the PlayStation version. So you're just you're just desperately hoping to stumble accidentally through the level, and of course the zombies have much better eyesight than you. The combat is beyond useless. You can't kill the Shibito, which gives them a legitimate sense of dread, but at the same time makes it very hard to explore the levels, because most of the time you don't have weapons. When you do get weapons, the zombies only stay down for like a minute. So there's really no point in exploring, but the game expects you to explore, because the only way to see the real ending of the game is to find every single archive item in the game. The archive items are little pieces of paper, like journal entries, pieces of artwork, videotapes, that kind of thing. And you have to explore every level, every stage, to find all of them to get the final ending. Problem is, you will never manage to find all of these elements, because you basically need to have a walkthrough sitting on your lap telling you where everything is, and even then it's almost impossible to find them because it's dark. Even if you have a light, it's hard to tell what is collectible because they don't shine. There's no visual cues to tell you what it is. You just have to be like hammering on the X button all the time, hoping that like there's like a sign on a wall, and you'll click on the sign, and I was like, oh, you can collect this sign, good job. But there's millions of other signs, there's millions of other things on the floor, like there's litter on the floor that you can't collect, but there's one little magazine in somebody's bedroom that you can pick up. How do you know that? You don't. There's not even a cue to tell you where you might look. Also, you have to play through several levels several times, because there are different unlockable features that trigger people's ability to move forward in other scenes. For instance, let's say you're wandering around the school. For no reason, you have to unlock a side door so that later on in the game, some other character can walk through that door. Why would your character ever to decide to unlock that door? Your character has no reason to do so, except that for some reason some character later on might do so. But like, there's no logical reason why you would do this. To move on through the game, you're even doing stuff you don't know what effect it will have later on, like freezing a towel. Why do you have to freeze a towel? I don't know. Like, there's little markers all over the place. You have to push over the markers and a little button falls down. To this day, I have no idea what those little buttons do when you push them down. But apparently it unlocks some feature later on in the game. So, also, you have to play through several levels several times as the same character, but you have to do different things. As in, sometimes you actually have to do diametrically opposed things in the same level. So it's like the character at the same time is doing two different things, moving on to do different places, and it makes the narrative a real mess. The game is also basically impossible, because there are several levels that require you to sneak through the stage unseen, which is just it's downright sadistic the way this game expects you to do it without a walkthrough. I maintain to this day that the game is impossible to do without a walkthrough. It's one of the most unsatisfying, most frustratingly difficult experiences. But Siren Blood Curse, I'll get back to that. Siren Blood Curse basically takes everything I complained about in the original game and fixes it. For instance, the levels are much blissfully shorter. There are no optional secondary objectives that you have to complete on a second playthrough. So you only play through an episode once, you complete it, you move on. You don't need to experiment with side objectives. Well, you kind of do, but in a minute. When it comes to collecting archive items is a lot less frustrating than it used to be. It still kind of relies on your willingness to kind of crawl all over the level, to just kind of click on the X button on everything. So it's still a little frustrating in that regard, but it's not impossible for a few reasons. One, the archive items are numbered, so if you miss an archive item in the next level, you know that you've missed something, and you can go back and search the level for it. Two, the levels are much more straightforward in the sense that you can't explore too far, so you're not going to get into too much trouble if you try to explore and find these items. So it's much easier to fill in the gaps. But the reason it's much easier to fill in the gaps is because when you find an archive item, it saves it. In the original Siren, what you had to do was you had to find the archive item, and then you had to complete the level. You had to survive all the way through to get that archive item saved. If you died during that level, your item was lost, you had to go back and find it again. And oftentimes those items are very, very hard to find, and you have to crawl your way through an army of Shibito to get there. The other downside is, sometimes you had to do this in very, very long levels. In fact, the longest levels have a few checkpoints in the middle, which is great, but the problem is, if you found the archive item before that checkpoint, then you reached the checkpoint, and then you died, it would restore you at the checkpoint, but you lost the archive item. So basically, you had to finish the extremely long levels from beginning to end without dying, without making a single mistake to get that archive item. And and the real reason it was most frustrating, more than anything, was the secret ending you get at the end of Siren is so not worth the effort. And I'm going to spoil it for you. I'm going to spoil the ultimate secret of Siren. And once you know the secret, the entire game series kind of becomes laughable. Like, basically, the true story of what's going on. You have no idea what's going on in the story, and so a lot of the game is trying to figure out what in the hell is going on. Basically, what happens, and it's revealed in the final video, which is like 10 seconds long. What happens is an alien falls from the sky thousands of years ago, or like 2,000 years ago, or something like that. And it falls in the middle of a Japanese village called Hanuda. And this alien, when it falls to the village, it's wounded, it's dying, and these villagers stumble across this dying alien creature. And at this time, the village is starving. And so, in their desperation, they take this alien creature that resembles a gigantic fish, okay? A gigantic alien fish creature. They stumble across this, they go, man, we're hungry, we're starving. So they eat it! They eat the alien fish creature, but the unforeseen effect of eating the alien fish is that it curses them. There's some kind of contagion or pathogen or psychic pollution inside, which taints the entire village bloodline. So the entire village becomes possessed with this demonic entity from outer space, and they all are compelled to worship it. And so they develop this entire cultish religion around the alien fish. And the air raid siren, the siren of the title that you hear, is actually the death howl, or the psychic death howl of this alien fish. And so the psychic influence of this fish causes the people of the village, on down through the generations, to behave in an insane manner. It makes them immortal, it makes them unkillable. And so basically, all of this is some kind of psychic fallout from an alien fish, which they decided to eat. Now, I don't care how hungry you are, if an alien crash lands, I don't think I would eat it. I don't know, I guess I have never been that hungry, but kind of seems like an ill-advised move. So that's basically the entire secret behind Siren, is it's an alien fish. But it's still pretty scary, just seeing how the people react to this insane thing and how they kind of mutate. I still don't fully understand why there's this religious significance, what the significance behind the blood is, why some people have to be sacrificed, and why there do seem to be some legitimate like religious artifacts that manage to womb the creatures. I don't know. But anyway, in Siren Blood Curse, the archive items are much easier to find. And I think the ending is a little bit more worth it. That said, there are some downsides to Siren. Siren Blood Curse manages to recycle a few almost verbatim, almost stealing entire levels, in fact, from the original Siren. It's kind of irritating when you're like, I've seen this before, I've played this. But the levels are much shorter, it's much more forgiving, and it's a lot more fun to play. A few other downsides. It involves... This one is more Americanized, which in this case is somewhat of a good thing. It involves an American documentary crew that goes to Hanuda Village, which disappeared long ago, kind of like an Unsolved Mysteries, Ripley's Believe It or Not documentary. They're trying to investigate the distant spirits behind this village, and they get caught up in it. So in that regard, it's kind of cool. The downside is, the American actors are forced to read a very poorly translated script from Japanese. So when you look at the archive items, you'll see some news footage from the original show that's done by live actors. But it's kind of poorly translated, so the dialogue is very stilted, very unnatural, very unflowing, with a lot of very strange pauses in the middle. The localization was not great. So, in that regard, you're not gonna get any real howlers like you would in like the original Resident Evil. There's no Master of Unlocking. There's no Jill Sandwich. but it's just not great. It's not good translation, and I think it could have benefited from some editor kind of going through and cleaning up the dialogue a little bit. Sneaking around with a flashlight is also a little bit more forgiving. The monsters are a little more stupid, but in that regard it's actually a lot better because you don't have to be razor-sharp precision. There's not a lot of trial and error to get through these levels. It's much more intuitive, and it's much more forgiving. And in this regard, I think Siren is much easier in that regard. Also, the music is very good. I like the music a lot. I thought it was actually a lot better than the original Siren. And also, it's a lot more episodic, in the sense that it kind of plays out a lot more like a movie. The narration doesn't jump around erratically and spasmodically like it did in the original. It's much more free-flowing, it's much more dramatically fitting. It feels like it's kind of playing through a movie much more than it did in the original Siren. Siren, the original version, was very disjointed. It was all over the place. You had to unlock certain keys to go on to other levels. You had to do this before you could do that. You didn't know why you were doing anything. You would just start a level and it'd be like, reach this road, or reach this building, or sneak through this without getting seen. And your question is, why? Why do I have to do that? And the game really doesn't have any good answers. It just kind of it sort of imposes these restrictions on you for no good reason. Siren Blood Curse gives you much more logical reasons to be progressing through the game. You know why you're doing something. You know why you're going to a certain place. You know why you have to get to the reception area in the hospital. It makes a lot more sense in that, and in that sense, it's a much better game. So I would recommend Siren Blood Curse much more highly over the original Siren. Not a good game, the original, and I would stay far away from it as possible. I don't care what anyone says. The plot elements were interesting, but the game design was cripplingly bad, and it makes the game basically unplayable. If you want to know more about Siren, watch the cinematics on YouTube or something. You'll get a lot more enjoyment out of it, not having to play it, not having to be perfect to play through the game. The plot is interesting, so watch that instead. Anyway, that was the most surprising game of the year for me. I hope you enjoyed it as well, and I hope you enjoyed listening to me just ramble on about Siren. So once again, Merry Christmas, everybody.